Hello, respected viewers. It's George from Ireland. So, welcome back to the channel once more. Um, there was that attempted coup the other day, Sunday, the so-called justice, um, by Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of Wagner Group. But the question is, what are the repercussions is going to be? Yevgeny Prigozhin has supposedly been granted a pardon. The treason charges dropped. Remember, he's facing up to 20 years in prison. Um, and has gone to Belarus. Is he allowed to take his money with him in Russia? Of course, he's got money sorted away abroad. And the others who participated in the coup, they're not going to be penalized. Wagner Group will be integrated into the Russian army. So I think there's going to be the end of Wagner Group as a distinct entity. Will Putin uphold his end of the bargain? Certainly not. He breaks every promise he ever made as soon as he feels he can get away with it. So, like Putin's promises of non-aggression become a promise of aggression. So Prigozhin, you think surely he's not imbecilic enough to actually trust Putin. Trust is a completely redundant concept when you're dealing with someone as oleaginous as Putin. So Prigozhin, if he's smart, will get himself to a third country, the UAE. I don't know. Trouble is, he can't go into any country that's a NATO country, EU country, in any or sign up the Rome Statute because he'd be put on trial and probably given a life sentence. And he can't go to any country that's too Russian aligned, like China, North Korea, because some say Putin might say, "Give him back to me," or just kill him, and they'll do it. He has to go somewhere that's genuinely neutral, can't be too easily pressured by Putin. But how about Putin? What are the consequences going to be for him? Well, his authority is significantly undermined because Wagner Group had 25,000 fighters at most. It's thought that he had rather few of those heading towards Moscow, getting to Voronezh, maybe 8,000. So the Russian army alone is 800,000. Admittedly, rather few of those are close to the center of Moscow. But if it came to a straight fight, nevertheless, they would outnumber Wagner Group. They would defeat Wagner Group. Obviously, we can't be certain of that. And I suppose Putin wasn't willing to run that risk because call the guy a traitor, the worst crime, certainly in Putin's big book. Why not destroy Prigozhin? Why make a deal with him? Because Putin wasn't sure of his ability to defeat Prigozhin, and would some of his generals change sides? Now, mostly the top brass loathes Prigozhin, but perhaps a few a bit of him impressed by his ruthlessness, his fighting spirit. And they also might dislike Valerian Gerasimov, who clearly has failed. Remember the most senior general of the Russian army, who's grossly overpromised and underdelivered, saying that Kiev could be taken in 2 days. 16 months later, the Russian army is nowhere near there. So Gerasimov is sort of a miniature Frankenstein, if you will. I set some store by physiognomy. Just look at his face, and the personality is written all over it. And to a lesser extent with Sergei Shoigu, the defense minister. And despite their colossal failures, they've not been sacked, and that was obviously one of Prigozhin's demands. They could have given him that, but Putin's authority has been weakened. He's been shown to be feeble. You think of various other failed coups or revolutions. The 1905 revolution failed. The Tsar's regime lasted another 12 years. Or to the provisional government, they faced the July days, or the Kornilov coup. The July days failed. Nevertheless, they were toppled only about 3 months later. Or Gorbachev faced that August coup in 1991. He lasted another 4 months. Remember, Putin's presidential term expires March next year. He's only got 9 months to go. Is he going to seek another term? And I think it probably is. Until this coup, he certainly would have done. Because remember, he changed the constitution again. This amendment allowed him another 2 terms, as in another 12 years, because they're terms of 6 years apiece. He'll be then 71. But maybe some people, some of these oligarchs, they don't really have much say. Other members of the elite think, is he really the man we want there? Remember, stability is supposed to be his watchword. He was supposed to ensure continuity and strong government. However oppressive that was, there'd be no disorder. And he's failed to deliver on that one. And okay, a battle royal at the gates of Moscow was avoided. And even if the Russian army prevailed, as very likely would, there would have been at least several hundred deaths on both sides, at least. And one of the reasons that Putin obviously wasn't certain he could save Moscow is, the Wagner troops. Some of them are actually Russian army veterans, are said to be really seasoned fighters. Some of them were, the scrapings of the jails, or some people have never been in the army, just rush through basic training. But they are battle hardened. They fought for months in Ukraine, and some of the professional Russian soldiers in the Russian army have never heard a shot fired in anger. How are they going to react? Soldiers say, well, the training just kicked in and I thought clearly and it was, wasn't too emotional about it. But some people are going to panic. It's difficult to tell till they're actually faced with that situation. So Putin just wasn't willing to run the risk. I don't know why he didn't use his air force more. And they've been so circumspect about that in Ukraine. The Russian Air Force had something like 3,000 aircraft at the beginning of the war. Okay, they've lost a few, but they outnumber the Ukrainian Air Force 10-1. They could have bet the bank on crushing Ukraine, sent all their planes against Ukraine. Okay, the Russians would have suffered, scores of aircraft losses, but they would have annihilated the Ukrainian Air Force. Too late now. Ukraine's got fairly good air defense. And now Wagner Group, they claim to have accounted for 39 Russian air crew during this very brief fight. Notice that, I said air crew, not aircraft, because a plane or even a helicopter can have 2 or more crew. Now, I've not seen any confirmation of that. I don't know that they actually destroyed a single one. But if they destroyed any, I suspect 39 air crew accounted for is a considerable exaggeration. So, Putin looks weaker than ever, really, and he's clung on to power and always pretend business as usual. Always choose to de-emphasize any defeats, but clearly it's a humiliation. Why he didn't extirpate Prigozhin earlier, and it shows, that there is grave disillusion with him. And Prigozhin, fascinatingly, he said a few months ago that Zelensky is a nice guy, Zelensky is valiant and an effectual leader, impliedly saying that Putin is none of these things. Now, he's never publicly breathed a word against Putin. So I think that's why he was pretending it wasn't a coup. He was just trying to rid Putin of the incompetent and useless, cowardly, backstabbing ministers of his. Well, Sergei Shoigu, the defense minister, Valerian Gerasimov, the most senior general in the Russian army, because then Putin might give him that. Prigozhin might get closer to the Kremlin, be able to kill Putin, capture Putin, whatever, get him to resign. But if you say, I'm coming for you, Putin, then Putin's going to use his whole arsenal against Prigozhin. And remember, Putin's actually fairly popular. Maybe even some of Prigozhin's men might still bear some personal allegiance to Putin. So get rid of them. There's also a personal grudge of Prigozhin, feeling he'd been set up to fail, that Gerasimov and Shoigu had deliberately undersupplied him with ammunition and so on to try and make taking Bakhmut too difficult. Did eventually succeed, but at an enormous cost. Prigozhin says something like over 20,000 dead, obviously probably double that wounded. Again, that's not confirmed, but I don't think that's an exaggeration. I don't see why he would lie about that, actually. So Prigozhin, he will no doubt drink some poison tea or have a heart attack. An awful lot of businessmen who've been highly critical of Putin have died abroad of sudden heart attacks. Okay, people have heart attacks all the time, but people who are quite in quite rude health, people in their 40s and so on, even in India, in the same hotel, 2 men on consecutive days. One guy died, the next day the other guy died. So it seems the SVR, Russia's intelligence agency, is bumping them off. And no, I can't prove it. In intelligence matters, one seldom has certainty. It's usually probability. So I'm not saying Putin's going to be overthrown right now. They thought if anything, it'd be people from inside the state, his own praetorians, the Presidential Security Service, or the FSB at the SVR, or somewhere like that, would oust him. The Russia Guard. Remember, he's tried to coup-proof the regime by having several competing agencies, military bodies, or security agencies. There's a bit of rivalry between them. No one's going to be strong enough to oust him. But yeah, Putin's going to last less time than we might think. If he does have another presidential term, I think that was going to be the last one. Okay, thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.